All right, guys. So here is the algebra breakdown of trying to solve for all the x's and k. This assumes that you watched the other video and learned how to set up the k for the reaction that corresponds to that equilibrium constant. Remember that when you have a k this close to 1, you're not able to drop any of these x's like we talked about just before the first exam. You have to keep them because the change is going to be significant in terms of that value for k. So in this case, we're going to have to use the quadratic equation, which means that we're going to have to know how to set up the a, b's, and c's that are part of our quadratic. So the first thing I'm going to do is try to get the denominator out of the fraction, meaning I'm going to multiply both sides by what's in parentheses there. And really all I'm doing in this step is rewriting things. My numerator, at least for now, is going to remain unchanged. And I'm going to set this whole thing equal to 1.20 times 10 to the minus 2 times this guy. Because when I multiply by both sides, it's going to cancel out of the bottom. This is its own step, so I'll just put a line there. Now, for the left side of the equation, we're going to have to FOIL, which remember is a specific type of distribution where we multiply the first things, then we multiply the outer things, multiply the inner things, multiply the last things. On this side, we are just going to distribute because we're just moving this thing across the bar. So first is going to be multiplying those two numbers together. They are in fact just numbers. They don't have any variable attached to them. There's no x term associated with them. So when we do that first thing, then we get a plain number, at least in this case. Outer means the thing in the beginning of the first one and the thing in the end of the last one. So negative 0.867 times 10 to the minus 2 times x, because that's what's over here. Inner is going to be the two things on the inside of the parentheses. So minus 5.08 times 10 to the minus 2 times x. And then last are going to be the things on the back of the parentheses. X times x is going to give us x squared. When we distribute these guys out, 1.2 times 10 to the minus 2 times 0.215 is just going to be a number. There's no x term associated with it. But there is an x associated with that guy there. Now we have x's, we have x squareds, and we have them on both sides of the equation. We also have no x's on both sides of the equation. So we need to set this guy equal to 0 and rearrange so we can simplify as much as possible. I'm going to try to keep my x positive, which means I'm going to subtract from these guys. I'm going to go ahead and do them both at the same time. Really, they are two different steps. Just keep that in mind. These x terms will cancel. When I subtract from there, it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to combine it with this guy here. You can pick whichever one you really like. You can combine them first. Doesn't really matter. When I subtract that from that, I end up with 0. So that cancels out over there. And I end up with that over here. So those are gone. This is a subtraction term. That is a subtraction term. Go ahead and simplify so that it's a little bit easier to look at. I'm also going to rearrange as I simplify. All right, so rearranging is going to give me x squared minus 0.1495x. That is all of that mushed together. And then plus 1.824 times 10 to the minus 3. We set the whole thing equal to 0. Now I have A, because it is understood that there's a 1 right there. I have B, and I have C. Now I have everything that I need to be able to plug into my quadratic equation. So to set it up, I'm going to have, hold on, let me pull it down so you can see. 0.1495, because there's B, that needs a minus sign in front of it. Plus or minus the square root, 0.1495 squared, minus 4 times A, which happens to be 1, so you could really ignore it if it made you feel better, times C. I'm going to put this whole thing over 2 times A, so really we're just going to put it over 2. So if you're doing this by hand on an exam, I would go ahead and do it in pieces. And by that I mean go ahead and leave this as is and figure out what the inside of that bracket is equal to. So if I square that number and then I subtract from that product, I come out with 0.050151. When I take the square root of that number, I get 0.123. And the reason that I would go ahead and do that extra step is if you get an answer that isn't one of the multiple choice answers, this gives you fewer places to have to type into a calculator again. So the way this works is you will come up with 0.1495 plus 0.123 divided by 2. This one's often referred to as the positive root because we are adding. That's 0.136. You also have 0.1495 minus 0.123. Again, you'll divide that whole thing by 2. Since we're subtracting, we can call this the negative root. These numbers look at least mostly familiar. We decided in the other video that this one doesn't make sense. It gave us a negative concentration, so it can't be. Okay. And this is the negative root, not a negative number. In this case, I believe that was the other answer. This was equal to X. X was equal to the change. And so now we have done all the work to plug something into our equilibrium line in our ICE table.